This is the weekly roundup presented by the Conversation Project, and I am Jay Cleveland Payne. I have 12 stories presenting for you right here, stories that caught my attention based on your engagement with our Conversation Project feeds on Facebook and X from Friday, March the 28th to Friday, April the 4th here in 2025. We're talking some Eric Adams, some Jeremy Boring, some Cory Booker, and 9 other stories to get you through your wrap up for the week that was the 4/5/2025. Now, our website home is thisisaconversationproject.com. Our email address, theconversationinbox@gmail.com. Stop by our website to figure out why we do these things 5 days a week for the daily show and this wrap up on Saturday. And of course, our email address to have conversations and do better or worse in the back and forth. We'll give you more details and more calls to actions at the end of the show. Plus, remind you that our sponsor, which we'll talk about more later as well, is Ground News. Go to our affiliate link. This is a conversationproject.com/ground news and get in on 40% off all their plans for their news coverage. And you will trust me, you will need this going forward. As we said, this is for the week ending April the 5th, 2025. No particular order as these stories came down. We just went through the listing of stories that we had throughout the week in the Daily Show, and we pulled them out and worked them through and got 12 stories to talk about in some semblance of interestingness needing to be readdressed. Let's start off at headline number 1. The headline reads, Americans want Trump to focus on prices over tariffs, but support deportation efforts, poll finds. This from a new CBS YouGov poll that finds 64% of Americans want Trump to focus on lowering consumer prices over any tariff policies. And despite the economic concerns that are going on, because tariffs are a thing, we'll get back to that in a bit, 53% of the Americans in this poll actually back the aggressive deportation efforts. So more than half are good with what's happening for deportation, essentially grabbing all the very hard criminals and people who should not be here and sending them somewhere else pretty quickly. The results show a divide between the economic priorities and support for immigration crackdowns. We are a nation that is not quite have our stuff together. We're not sure exactly what we're doing, but as far as Trump is going right now, the people seem to like what he's doing with the immigration stuff. We'll see what the next week's polls will say about that, as we're finding more horror stories in the unintended consequences parts for that one, and we're seeing plenty of horror stories with unintended consequences from the tariffs, which people already did not like. We got news this week that the White House Correspondents Association canceled their comedian headliner for the annual dinner, which was going to be Amber Ruffin, who is a comedian, a writer for Seth Meyers' show, and works on the weekends on CNN on Have I Got News for You. The traditional comedian, which has only been a tradition for maybe the last 40 so years, is not happening this year because, well, we don't really know. No actual explanation was given for getting rid of Amber Ruffin specifically, or comedian in general, other than the politics of the time and then want to focus on journalism and scholarship. What's been put in its place? No one really knows yet. Will this be the nerd prom of the past? Probably not. In fact, a lot of journalists seem to say they're not really down for doing this thing this year either. Donald Trump obviously not going. We'll see if anybody for the administration actually shows up. But this event will continue. The rewards will be happening and speeches will go on, focusing on journalism, but no one to really do the comedy bits that sort of bring us together or have to make this actually an interesting event for the people outside of the Washington Beltway. I got a lot of response to this story here, and most of it was sort of kind of but many folks were sort of pushing back on the sort of swerve in the actual action, in which if you watch other videos on this, you can understand the swerve in the actual action. Joe Rogan breaks with Trump, calls Venezuelan deportation horrific. Now, we talked about deportation 2 stories ago, how people are basically down with the deportation efforts the administration is doing. But Joe Rogan had a small clip that went clipped from his podcast that basically went viral, talking about how he condemned Trump's mass deportation efforts in Venezuela. I always mess it up. Calling it horrific and other words that we're not going to say here because we don't want to get those strikes. Now, here's where it gets a little squirrely, or a lot squirrely, due to where you want to place your eyeballs in this administration. Joe Rogan complained about the policies having a lack of due process. Essentially, anybody they suspected was a gang member going to this jail in El Salvador, they picked them up, they put them on a plane, they flew them down there, and they're there. In fact, right now there's issues with a person who's stuck there who should not be there. There's many who probably shouldn't be there. There's a big case going on. We'll bring that up in a bit. But the whole point of it, with no due process for anyone going forward, that is all he is basically blacking down on, is the due process part for this particular action here. Not deportations in general, not mass deportations at all, not Donald Trump in the least. He hasn't complained about other things going forward. Just one small clip of him complaining about the trips to El Salvador for these Venezuelan gang members. That's all he's actually breaking away from. Not from Trump, but from this thing here. So it is a bit of a swerve, a bit of a sleight of hand there to get the story out there. But it is one of the first cracks in the armor of people who support Donald Trump who are complaining about him. You hear some things from other podcasters, such as Dave Portnoy, who's saying, I lost $200 million in the stock market this weekend because of tariffs. So there are people who are not quite happy what's going on overall and want Trump to kind of figure out what's happening. But here's a case where someone tried to take the headline and bury the lead. It's not that Trump is really really hated in the Joe Rogan household in his universe. He just doesn't like this one particular thing. With only 12 stories to present over the week and over 5 days worth of stories to talk about, it's hard to really pick the right ones, the wrong ones, the good ones, the bad ones. And sometimes we miss, sometimes we hit. This is one that may be a miss with all the things going on, but the saga of this story, the way it's gone down and the way we talked about it over the years, has made this one that's really one that really hits deep in my heart. And when this one was revealed to have a resolution this week, I wanted to talk about it. It almost got axed for some other stories that were either bloodier or more political, but we can't have them all be bloody and political. So for number 4, the story we have here in the spot is Coyote versus Acme finds new studio home after Warner Brothers shelving. Shelved last year by Warner Brothers, will be distributed by Ketchup Entertainment, as we've said in earlier pieces. Ketchup paid about $60 million for the film, $50 million, $60 million, only to basically to wipe out the $30 million that they got at Warner Brothers for shelving it with the tax write-off. Of course, stars folks like John Cena, Will Forte, and the aforementioned Wile E. Coyote, who is suing Acme for product malfunctions. The theatrical release will be expected to be announced soon. Now that they have the rights to it, it's basically a done film. Maybe Ketchup will have to do some more, title stuff and whatnot like that, changing out some things there. But essentially, it is ready to go. This will be released fairly quickly, and people will get a chance to see the movie that the actors all said was an amazing movie, and we get a chance to find out why Warner Brothers is doing shady stuff. Because if it's a good movie, we'll have that specter, that cloud to hang over us for a while. Eric Adams got a favor, although it didn't quite come from where he thought it was coming from. A New York judge, federal judge in New York, actually dismissed the case of corruption over New York City Mayor Eric Adams. Now, here's the thing. In the process of eliminating the actual case with prejudice so it cannot come back, the judge actually had some words for the Trump administration, who were actually pushing for this to happen and were firing prosecutors who weren't making this happen, because it looked a lot like a quid pro quo. It looked a lot like making Adams their puppet, making easy for Adams to push some of their agenda stuff because they did him a favor. So the judge, calling this process completely troubling, deeply troubling, said, we're going to kill this, we're going to get rid of it, and we're going to leave Adams with less of the cloud of judgment. Now, that does not mean the Trump administration will not still try to push Adams to do their bidding, because he's kind of falling in line anyway. But we're going to make it less obvious, because I'm doing it because we need to get this case out of the way, and Adams needs to get to work. Get to work means taking care of his city, doing what he can to improve his nation going forward. Now, there were allegations of corruption with ties to Turkey. Why Turkey? Only Adams can answer that question. But those corruption charges are now officially gone forever. So Adams says outcome proves his integrity, while opponents say that the DOJ has really bad standards. What we do know is Adams is running for re-election in New York City again, dropping the D, going to I, and will form his own little small party to make things happen. That moves in a shift for all the other folks who are trying to vie for that spot in NYC for the mayor, and it makes a bit a lock for Andrew Cuomo to be the Democratic person, although he still has to fight all the Democrats who don't really like him so much. We look at this picture of Russian troops, and we think about what's going on in Ukraine, because this goes counter to the work that Donald Trump is trying to do. We're going to give the president his props in trying to make this ceasefire, try to make this peace happen in Russia, in Ukraine, even though he's probably going to give Russia everything they want. And that's sort of the problem. Because while Russia was on the books for getting into some of these peace ceasefire deals, saying he was going to sign the things for energy, not attacking energy places and not attacking in the seas and in the air and stuff like that, and trying to back on things, he hasn't actually signed anything. He's asked for more concessions, and while asking for more concessions, he's actually had the largest draft of conscriptions since the whole thing started, with 160,000 more men aged 18 to 30 being added to the forces. Now, this comes with the basically coming out of people. Some people who were conscribed earlier on are actually coming out of service for a while. So it's going to replace more folks, but bringing more folks in. But it also, like I said, goes along with the ceasefire agreements with Ukraine that are not actually being signed, specifically one in the Black Sea, and of course with the energy attacks going forward. The Kremlin says the Christians won't be deployed for combat at the moment, but they'll be in reserves just in case. We're pausing from the news stories. We have 12 stories we're promising. 6 are down, 6 more to come. But first, a quick pause for a question, a favor, if you will. We want to grow the Conversation Project. We want to grow our reach, get our fingerprints and other things, get more people involved. And we need your help to do that, because that's how social media, that's how these videos do with things that are news updates and our commentary. We like to think we're more news than commentary, but we have commentary as well. We need you to help bring folks into the field. Like the video you're watching right here, or like the audio if you listen to the audio version as well, and let me know that I picked the right stories from the past week to review. Like the video, and the algorithm will think that this is a good video to watch, and he'll share it up with more people so they can get a chance to enjoy or hate watch it based on what goes on. If you know people who enjoy this type of news coverage and may enjoy some of my commentary, share it with them directly so we can get more people in the queue that way. And of course, if you're not getting me natively in your feeds, subscribe. Get it directly into your feeds every single day. We get you stuff every single day with, every day but Sunday with this thing here. But we have things all day long on YouTube, on TikTok, on Facebook, on X, all those things. So subscribe so when you get to us, we'll get you something. A great news update, great news revision, great chance to talk about stuff. And we'll talk about this later, how this is seeming like just a rundown of stories. It's actually a dialogue between you and I with stories that you deem as conversational. A conversation happened between Laura Loomer and Donald Trump. And from that conversation, Trump fires some National Security Council officials. Now, it's not officially that Laura Loomer said these guys need to go, but several NEC staffers were dismissed after a talk between Trump and Loomer because Loomer raised concerns about the loyalty of some of these members. These are top-ranking members of the NSC. While one Mike Walls doesn't have any issues with this going forward, but the biggest thing happening is, well, there are issues. These guys are folk that were holdovers from the last administrations, actually holdovers for a while, and Loomer is stating that they don't actually want to follow the Trump plan, go forward with that one. So after this conversation, there were purges. Now, critics say the purge was ideologically motivated, essentially saying, yes, Laura Loomer said they didn't follow along with Trump, so they got rid of him. Trump says personnel changes all the time, which it does, but not exactly as suspiciously after a conversation with someone like Loomer. Changes coming to the Daily Wire, maybe big changes, as the rumors are turning into big innuendo, although they're being denied by many still inside. But the Daily Wire has actually announced some layoffs after its CEO, Jerry Borning, resigned from the actual company, laying off what seems like the bulk of the children's programming division. One whole division is gone because of issues. The issues not known to the public. Maybe they're financial, maybe they're internal, but right now a big chunk of Daily Wire folks no longer work for the Daily Wire. This is following Jerry Boring's leaving, as he's leaving to go do other things, focus on other types of events, other types of work, maybe work on some of his own production company stuff without having a Daily Wire as either an albatross or as a sugar daddy to make things happen. So he can do what he wants to, but doesn't have that backing of the day job of Daily Wire. Leadership transition is essentially how they're calling it. They're starting restructuring to basically shore themselves up for the future. We're all doing not so great these days. All of us media companies that are on the internet have our issues, so they are doing the same thing. No specific figures were released by them, but it just seems like in the ether of the internet, you're hearing bits and pieces that it looks like it is the bulk of the vision that makes children's programming for the Daily Wire. Maybe they're focused on more heavier stuff, or maybe they just are getting jettison things that just aren't working. We'll see within time. We're back to Luigi Mangione because it's not about heart-shaped notes in his socks. It's about what actually going to happen when he goes to trial, and this thing really goes heavy. AG Pam Bondi is asking for the death penalty for Mangione. The federal prosecutors are asking the state attorneys to pursue the capital punishment for Mr. Mangione. Now, these are state charges. There's federal charges as well, but basically everybody, there's New York, there'll be some Pennsylvania, that won't be anything, but they're basically pushing for this to be a big deal going forward. He's accused of assassinating United Healthcare CEO using a 3D printed weapon, being closely monitored by everyone due to the implementations on digital weaponry, of course, also the services by insurance agencies, and just people who seem to fall in love with the criminal types who are just so gosh darn cute. This is going to be one of the ugliest trials we've had in a while because it's going to be one of the kind of the dumbest trials we have so far. This is a guy that's caught on tape doing a thing that's not very good, so there should be some pretty simple repercussions for this. However, people want him freed because they think he's Robin Hood. He is not. Tenth story for the day is Cory Booker. The story is Cory Booker, who spent 25 hours and 5 minutes speaking on the floor in Congress a few days ago. He broke a record that was held for over 50 years by Strom Thurmond, who spoke for 24 hours and I think 18 minutes. Strom Thurmond was trying to stop a civil rights bill and not give me any rights 50 years ago. Cory Booker wasn't really fighting anything. He was just basically speaking. So what he did is questionable in the matter of what it actually accomplished. He got his name out there, recognition. He showed that a Democrat was willing to do some resistance and fight back on the Trump administration and all the things going on, at least speak out in a public manner, doing it properly, holding people's attention, although not holding up any actual legislation in the process. A lot of protests against immigration policies, judicial appointments, not a lot of reading the phone book, which is very impressive. Cory Booker did a whole lot of things to do this. He didn't have any sort of way to, because if you can't leave the floor. Someone can ask a question and maybe you can sit down for a bit, but you cannot leave the floor or your speech stops. So Cory Booker dehydrated himself for days and did all these little weird sort of yoga tricks so he could stand there in a suit and just speak for as long as possible, as long as he could go, making the 24-hour mark to beat Strom Thurmond's record. Is this going to put him in a front runner spot for Democrats for president in 2028? Probably not. But it does make a point. It does get some headlines. People are talking about it until the next thing, which happened to be our story at number 11. The tariffs. The Liberation Day tariffs. So we're going to go forward a few days to Thursday and Friday after the tariffs were announced on the Wednesday, on our Liberation Day, if you will, which we actually hyped up and sort of joked about on Tuesday before, talking into what it was and seeing what happened. Liberation Day was Wednesday, and then we got the realization of what it was on Thursday and on Friday, as stocks fell immensely following the steep tariff announcement by Donald Trump. Markets fell as Trump unveiled his sweeping new tariffs on imports on China and Europe, which are already in place, going in place anyway, plus every nation across the world. It's like they went to Wikipedia, said, how many countries are there in this planet? They said 148. Oh, sure, all 148 gets a tariffs, including tariffs on places that don't have people on them. There are unincorporated islands that house polar bears and penguins, and they get tariffed. The nation of Lesotho gets the largest tariff on the list, and all they do is produce garments. And of course, as we talked about a few weeks back for the State of the Union, no one knew where it was, and they said, "Oh no, we're important." Apparently, they're important enough to levy 50% tariffs on their goods, which is just textiles. The S&P dropped 500 points. S&P 500 dropped 1.6 points. Nasdaq slid 2.2 points. Investors' concerns over inflation and trade escalating, as many are escalating. China has already levied about a 30% tariff back on us. Other folks are holding their power dry, but they are going to do something soon. Economists are warning that this move could drag on a global recovery for all of us. This is either the ballsiest move ever by Donald Trump, if it works as negotiation or bringing money in, or this will collapse the economies of the world pretty quickly. I think the latter is what most more people are looking at. So if Trump pulls this off, he is maybe the greatest president ever. Chances are he's yet to pull off much of anything in this administration, and all the things he says he pulled off in the last administration, let's be honest here, did not work out so well. Our final story number 12 today. Joint Chiefs nominee refutes Trump's claim about MAGA hat story. This is the story of Lieutenant General Dan Kane, who is actually already retired. And so this makes him an interesting nominee for Joint Chiefs of Staff, because most people have been full generals, 4 stars, and most people are actually still generals in the time being and in late transition. So they find someone who's at that spot so they can move on over. This being a person who had retired, he did his public service and was done. And he also was saying the claims that Donald Trump met him in Afghanistan and he put on a MAGA hat and said, "Sir, I'm very proud of you," didn't happen. Kane said under oath he's never worn political apparel while in uniform, period. So wearing a MAGA hat in uniform didn't happen at the official meeting. He thinks that Trump is confusing him with someone else and just got the Raising Cane name in his head because that was his call sign going forward. It ignites some concerns over military politicization, essentially how things are going and who Trump is putting in places to do things by work. Now, there are a lot of complaints about how they relieved the last Joint Chiefs person because he was seen as a DEI hire, and putting this person in here because he's a white guy with a cool call sign. That's essentially how, if you just listen to the conversations that Trump has, it just sounds that way. And so if it sounds that way, maybe it is that way. I don't know Lieutenant General Kane's actual classifications, actual accomplishments, other than a small rundown of things. He's probably a very capable general, and he'll probably do the job. But there's a guy that was already capable doing the job already. And there are other capable people who could do the jobs that are sitting in the wings waiting for the job, as opposed to pulling some other guy who I'm sure Trump thinks will be loyal to him because he did him a solid and put him in a role that he was not eligible for. Not saying qualified, but being that he's not a full general and he's not in the Army or Air Force anymore, that's kind of a reason to not pick him, because he's not there on the bench waiting to go in the game. It's calling up. It's not calling up a guy from the minor leagues to go take a next bat in the next game. It's calling up. It's calling up Doug Flutie, who's doing commercials about pills to work on your testosterone to come and take the bench to take that game. That's what it is. We have wrapped up the 12 stories as we promised. And right now we're going to take a quick pause before we go into all the boring stuff that is how the things work and how the calls to action, stuff like that. And we need to get a shout out to Ground News. Ground News is our sponsor for basically all our weekend stuff. We throw Ground News at it because it's the best chance to really go into reflection on how we do our news for the Conversation Project. And how do we do our news for the Conversation Project? We go to various different aggregators across the internets and pull stories, look at headlines, look how they're doing things, and see which stories are good to put out there for you to engage in. We'll explain that in a bit. But sometimes we get a little confused with how things are being covered, and sometimes some stories aren't covered properly or covered at all in some places. So we go to Ground News to get a bit of a reality check on what's going on. Ground News offers up news coverage for anything out there, whether it's a local story, whether it's a national story, whether it's an international story. Ground News aggregates news stories from around the web. You put in a subject, you type it in there, they'll look up the story and they'll pull you all the sources who are covering it and give you synopsis of what they're saying. So the beauty of that is not just you see how many people are covering the story, which may be a big deal or not big deal, but you see what's actually being covered by their headlines and by the actual talking in points in the stories. As I've said many times, you'll see the difference between the MSNBC headline and the Fox News headline and who's covering what. In the past couple of weeks, we had a lot of things that had not been covered, a lot of large, blatant stories not covered because one side doesn't want to talk about it, or the other side wants to talk about it way too much than it's important of. That's where the blind spot feature comes in, where you can see what stories are not being covered by various sources and how badly they want to cover those stories, even in those cases. That's what that does there. You can see an aggregate of where the stories come from. You can understand who the source is, how they come from, who owns it, and how they cover stories. And they are a sponsor. And so to get some of their sponsorship cash, you need to go to our link. This is theconversationproject.com/ground news. This is theconversationproject.com/ground news. And what you can get from them is a discount. They have 3-tiered plans. Their Vantage plans is their full plan of all the bells and whistles, all the insights, all the tracking you do for stories from the Vantage plan. You can get discounts on other plans as well, but the Vantage plan is what we use daily to check out on stories, to check out on topics, check out things that we don't quite see getting the right coverage, or it doesn't seem like it's really fair nor balanced or equal or anything going forward. Ground News helps us figure out what we're going on, keeps us grounded, and keep you as well. Use our link, as an affiliate link. This is theconversationproject.com/ground news. We get a small commission for your buy. But subscribe to the service and get better at the news. Conversation Project lives online at our website. This is theconversationproject.com. That's where you can find past episodes of all what we do. Our daily show called Things You Might Not Have Heard goes through 10 stories on Monday and 8 for the rest of the week of stories from the previous engagement, weekend, and the previous day that you deem as conversational. We pick a rundown of news stories for the day based on stories that you tell us are worthy of talking about. We will get to that in just a minute. There are other things as well. There are more sponsors there, so click out for the sponsors page. There's also our partnerships page. We ask for you, if you deem us worthy of what we're doing for this thing here and all of our stuff, giving you good news coverage, giving you fair, solid news coverage, and of course, giving you just enough commentary and a place to talk about things and not just overly beating you over the head with an idea. Consider being a partners. Our partners are people who do a financial contribution every single month to help us go through. In the Cup of Coffee tier, we have Harold Braxton, Kobe Green, and Eldon Kidd. In the Spare Change tier, it's Joy Winters. Go to our website, click the link for partnerships. We also have some one-time donation things there as well. But our platform is buymeacoffee.com. My name, J. Clifton Payne, and you can find the tier of your choosing to help us along going forward. Be a sponsor, go to some of our sponsorships, be a partner, help us move along with our stuff, our work here for the Conversation Project. Now, all the calls to action, all the calls you could ask for, and plenty more you really don't want. But our website, this is theconversationproject.com. Our email address, theconversationinbox@gmail.com. Go to our website and see what you can see about us there, and email me with your conversational thoughts on the stories we should pick and things we should do and things that we do for production as well. Now, how we get our stories into our feeds is from our feeds. How we get stories into these programs from our feeds. We call them feeds. They're just our links on Facebook and X, our social media pages there. Facebook.com/This is Conversation Project, X.com/TH_conversation. Very simple. Follow us there. And every 50 minutes or so, we post news articles from across the internet. We want you to engage in them. Click the emoji face of your choosing for Facebook. Click the heart button, the like for YouTube. For X. Engage in the stories. Reply to the stories. Engage in conversation. Share them with other folks. And what we get from you is we pull on the day of, for stories, the engagement scores for all these things. So come Monday morning, we'll see what stories we're engaged in on Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, and up until about 3 a.m. on Monday. And those stories get first look going into our queue for our rundown. We'll take the top half of stories, 90 or so stories within a weekend, about 30 stories within a single day. And the top half of those stories, we'll take a quick look. For Monday, we're going to give you, on things you might not have heard, 10 stories that you deem conversational. The rest of the week will be 8 stories. And then if you don't like the stories you picked, email me, reply in the comments, go back for that one. That's how we do that one there. All these things help the Conversation Project work along with the financial contributions that you want to give to if you want to. But it does not work at all without your engagement. engage in the story so we know what stories to talk about. That is how we choose our lineup stories for the Conversation projects. With that, we wrap up another edition of the weekly Roundup. Attached to the Conversation Project's Things You Might Not Have Heard, the daily show, from the Conversation Project, brought to you by More Better Media, LLC. A whole lot of stuff there. This is for the week ending April the 5th, 2025. Hopefully you had a great week, and we'll have a better week going forward. If you're watching your stocks go by, you're probably not having the greatest week ever, and it probably won't be fixed anytime soon, but there are other things to talk about, which is why we exist. We want to talk about more than just the big headline story. The tariffs and the stocks and the uncertainty is a big story. Everyone's talking about it. Everyone's covering it. But not everyone's covering everything the way we should. So we put out there for stories for you to tell us are engaging. And we make sure that we're talking about some other stories that are conversational, not just what Wolf Blitzer wants to put in the rundown every day. No hurt to Wolf Blitzer, but he's got an agenda. We've got an agenda. We'll make our agenda a bit more lucrative to you. We want to talk about everything. You tell us what to talk about. Just like that. Love you. Mean it. Make sure you're staying limber, hydrated, and on task for everything that you need to do for us and those around you and for yourself to ensure that your life stays a marathon, an ongoing race, and not a sprint that ends quick in a flash and is over. We're done for today. We'll have some more based on how you follow us on our feeds and all our things. You'll see more things on TikTok with some hot takes and some other stories down the line. But come Monday, we'll be back with more of the things you might have heard brand, things with 10 stories to get into. And some of those stories may make it to this thing here again for the weekend. What stories will make the weekend roundup? We'll see next Saturday.